It is not. Quantum physics has been so clear about it. Heisenberg himself, co-discoverer of quantum physics, said atoms are not things. They are only tendencies. So instead of thinking of things, you have to think of possibilities. They're all possibilities of consciousness.
You now can see in numerous labs around the United States objects that are large enough to be seen by the naked eye, and they are in two places simultaneously. And you can actually take a photograph of that. Now, I suppose if you showed a photograph, they'd say, oh, great, here's this nice blob of colored light, and I see there's a bit of it over here and another bit of it. So you got a picture of two dots. What's the big deal? And if so, well, look right in the chamber. You can see it right there. Oh, I see two things there. You say, no, that's not two things. That's one thing. It's the same thing in two places. I'm not sure that people's jaw would drop about it because I don't think people really believe it. And I don't mean that people say, oh, you're lying, or, oh, the scientists are confused. I think it is so mysterious that you can't even understand how amazing it is. And then furthermore, you've seen Star Trek and whatnot. Beam me up, Scotty. So it all seems sort of, oh, well, what does that really mean? But you've got to really stop and think about what that means, that it's the same object and it's in two places at once. And people tinker in the lab and they get angry about things and they have lunch and they go home and they lead their lives just as though nothing utterly astounding is happening, because of course that's how you have to go about it. And yet there is this completely amazing magic sitting right in front of your eyes.
Quantum physics calculates only possibilities. But if we accept this, then the question immediately comes, what chooses among these possibilities to bring the actual event of experience? So we immediately see that consciousness must be involved. The observer cannot be ignored.
We know what an observer does from a point of view of quantum physics, but we don't know who or what the observer actually is. Doesn't mean we haven't tried to find an answer. We've looked. We've gone inside of your head. We've gone into every orifice you have to find something called an observer, and there's nobody home. There's nobody in the brain. There's nobody in the cortical regions of the brain. There's nobody in the subcortical regions or the limbic regions of the brain. There's nobody there called an observer. And yet we all have this experience of being something called an observer, observing the world out there.
Is this the observer, and which is so intricate to understanding the wacky, weird world of quantum particles and how they react? Is this, then, the observer?
In my modeling, the observer is the spirit inside the four-layered biobody suit. And so it's like the ghost in the machine. It is the consciousness that's driving the vehicle. And it is observing the surround. The four layers of the biobody suit have all kinds of sensory systems to pick up signatures from the surround.
In Washington, D.C., the so-called murder capital of the world, there was a big experiment in the summer of 1993 where 4,000 volunteers came from 100 countries to collectively meditate for long periods of time throughout the day. It was predicted in advance that with such a sized group, you'd have a 25% drop in violent crime, as defined by the FBI, in Washington that summer. Well, the chief of police went on television saying that, look, it's going to take 2 feet of snow to reduce crime by 25% in Washington, D.C. this summer. But by the end, the police department became a collaborator and author of this study because the results, in fact, showed a 25% drop in violent crime in Washington, D.C., which we could predict on the basis of 48 previous studies that had already been done on a smaller scale.
This leads naturally to wonder, are people affecting the world of reality that they see? You betcha they are. Every single one of us affects the reality that we see, even if we try to hide from that and play victim. We all are doing it.
Just tell me where you are. Good. But hurry, will you please, because these models are giving me a headache.
10 minutes.
Subway exhibit comes to us from Japan and Mr. Masuro Emoto. Mr. Emoto became terribly interested in the molecular structure of water and what affects it. Now, water is the most receptive of the 4 elements. Mr. Emoto thought perhaps it would respond to non-physical events. So he set up a series of studies, applied mental stimuli, and photographed it with a dark field microscope. This first picture is a picture of water from the Fujiwara Dam. And this picture is the same water after receiving a blessing from a Zen Buddhist monk. Now, in this next series of pictures, Mr. Emoto printed out words, taped them to bottles of distilled water, and left them out overnight. This first photograph is a picture of the pure distilled water, just the essence of itself. These subsequent photographs, as you can see, are each different. This is the chi of love. And we move along here to thank you. And you can see where he taped that to this bottle here. But if you read Japanese, you already knew that. Now, Mr. Emoto speaks of the thought or intent being the driving force in all of this. The science of how that actually affects the molecules is unknown, except to the water molecules, of course. And it's really fascinating when you keep in mind that 90% of our bodies are water.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it? If thoughts can do that to water, imagine what our thoughts can do to us.
Absolutely, thought alone can completely change the body.
Most people don't affect reality in a consistent, substantial way because they don't believe they can. They write an intention and then they erase it because they think that's silly. I mean, I can't do that. And then they write it again and then they erase it. So time average, it's a very small effect. And it really comes down to the fact that they believe they can't do it.
If you accept with every rudiment of your being that you will walk on water, will it happen? Yes, it will. But you know, it's like positive thinking. It's a wonderful idea, positive thinking, But what it usually means is that I have a little smear of positive thinking covering a whole mass of negative thinking. So thinking positive is not really thinking positive, it's just disguising the negative thinking that we have.
When we think of things, then we make the reality more concrete than it is. And that's where we become stuck. We become stuck in the sameness of reality. Because if reality is concrete, obviously I'm insignificant. I cannot really change it. But if reality is my possibility of consciousness itself, then immediately comes the question of how can I change it? How can I make it better? How can I make it happier? You see how we are extending the image of ourselves? In the old thinking, I cannot change anything because I don't have any role at all in reality. Reality is already there. It's material objects moving in their own way from deterministic laws. And mathematics determines what they will do in a given situation. I, the experiencer, have no role at all. In the new view, yes, mathematics can give us something. It gives us the possibilities that all these movements can assume, but it cannot give us the actual experience that I'll be having in my consciousness. I choose that experience. And therefore, literally, I create my own reality. It may sound like a tremendous bombastic claim by some new agey without any understanding of physics whatsoever, but really quantum physics is telling us that.
Hey, how was the shoot? So. Your boss called. He's worried about you. Amanda, I want to thank you for letting me stay here. I know I'm a bit much sometimes and that it's been tough after Bob and all. And you've just been so wonderful. I mean, I make a mess and, well, I clean up afterwards, but it's not really your style.
Sometimes I think you make me sane.
Me? The day I make someone sane, they're in trouble. Anyway, I made you something as a thank you gift. Open it. I went through your pictures and picked my favorite ones. And it took me forever because there's so many good ones. This. That's for all the wonderful photos you will be taking. Oh.
I've had a strange day. Thank you.
What is my life? Why is your life? What is life? What's going on? Where am I going? What happens when I die? Why is there anything at all? What is reality? What is reality?
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? If thoughts can do that to water, imagine what our thoughts can do to us.
These are questions. Reality ultimately comes down to our experience. I'm faced as successful answer.
Have you ever thought about what thoughts are made of? Is there a substance of thought?
I guess it just depends on what you think is real. The
world being possible timelines of reality. Until we choose.
Are all realities in the quantum field existing simultaneously?
My definition of an addiction is something really something that you can't stop.
There literally are different worlds in which we live. There's the macroscopic world that we see. There's the world of our cells. There's the world of our atoms. There's the world of our nuclei. These are each totally different worlds. They have their own language. They have their own mathematics. They're not just smaller. Each is totally different. But they're complementary. Because I am my atoms, but I am also my cells. I'm also my macroscopic physiology. It's all true. They're just different levels of truth. The deepest level of truth uncovered by science and by philosophy is the fundamental truth of unity. At that deepest subnuclear level of our reality, you and I are literally one.
I wake up in the morning and I consciously create my day the way I want it to happen. Now, sometimes, because my mind is examining all the things that I need to get done, it takes me a little bit to settle down and get to the point of where I'm actually intentionally creating my day. But here's the thing, when I create my day, and out of nowhere, little things happen that are so unexplainable, I know that they are the process or the result of my creation. And the more I do that, the more I build a neural net in my brain that I accept that that's possible. It gives me the power and the incentive to do it the next day.
In addiction, we have a supreme, beautiful opportunity to decipher the difference between our intangibility of our nobleness of character and the day-to-day business of how that character is revealed in a three-dimensional world through our bodies.
I hate weddings.
And what we will learn is that addiction is the feeling of a chemical rush that is cascaded through the bodies through a whole assortment of glands and ductless glands and through the spinal fluid, a feeling that some would call a sexual fantasy. It only takes one sexual fantasy for a man to have a hard-on. In other words, it only takes one thought here for a man to have an erection in his member. And yet, there was nothing outside of him that gave him that. It was what was within him that gave him that.
Oh. Hey, Amanda, I didn't know you were there.
Guilty.
A wedding? Come on, blink.
This is a good assignment, if you'd see it that way.
What to see? I do. They did.
Oh, God, Amanda. I mean, you live in your past. I mean, everything with you is about what happened. You hate churches, you hate weddings, you hate guys. And I want you to go scope it out.
Don't need to. I got money there.
I know. I took the pictures, remember? You got too many memories clouding your vision. Oh, Amanda, you know you're the best technical photographer I have. And I want to have some great pictures. You know what? You need a good Polish wedding. And watch out for those good Catholic boys, huh?
You need the priest.
Come on, get out of here.
Bye.
When I was younger, I had lots of ideas about what God was. And now I realize I'm not conscious enough to truly understand what that concept means.
that I am at one with the great being that made me and brought me here and that formed the galaxies and the universes, etc. How did that get taken out of religion? It was not hard. Most of the problems that religion and the various philosophical movements down through the centuries have produced have been errors because that's where they started. That God is a distinct, separate being from us, to whom I must offer worship, whom I must cultivate, humor, please, and hope to attain a reward from at the very end of my life. That is not what God is. That is a blasphemy.
God is such a broad thing, most of the parts of which that are associated with organized religion is something that I sort of recoil at and something that I think has done a lot of harm to the world, done harm to women, done harm to oppressed peoples, done harm to the World Trade Center.
And yet, at the same point, we have the epitome of a great science. The closest science has ever come to explaining Jesus' interpretation that the mustard seed was larger than the kingdom of heaven. And the only science that can fit into that analogy is quantum physics. Now, we have great technology, from anti-gravity magnets and magnetic fields of zero-point energy. We have all that, and we still have this ugly, superstitious, backwater concept of God.
People fall into line very readily when they're threatened by these cosmic sentences of everlasting punishment. But this is not how God is. And once you start to question the traditional images, caricatures of God, people feel you're an agnostic or an atheist or a subverter of the social order.
God must be greater than the greatest of human weaknesses, and indeed, the greatness of human skill, that God must even transcend a most remarkable to emulate nature in its absolute splendor. How can any man or woman sin against such a greatness of mind? How can any one little carbon unit on Earth, in the backwaters of, indeed, the Milky Way, the boondocks, betray God Almighty? That is impossible. The height of arrogance is the height of control of those who create God in their own image.
I now present to you Mr. and Mrs. Richard Buck Filipowski.
Brain, when it fires its thoughts, is likened unto the landscape of a thundercloud. And the synaptic cleft is the sky between the storm and the earth receptor site. And you see this foreboding dark cloud boiling in the sky. And you see electrical impulses moving through it, veins of electric light, and then you see it hit the ground. Rain looks like a thunderstorm. when it is presenting a coherent thought. So no one has ever seen the thought. What they do see in neurophysics is that they see a storm raging around different quadrants of the brain. Those are areas that are mapped in the body and what the person must be responding to. A holographic image. Rage, murder, hate, compassion, love.
The brain does not know the difference between what it sees in its environment and what it remembers, because the same specific neural nets are then firing.
The brain is made up of tiny nerve cells called neurons. These neurons have tiny branches that reach out and connect to other neurons to form a neural net. Each place where they connect is integrated into a thought or a memory. Now, the brain builds up all its concepts by the law of associative memory. For example, ideas, thoughts, and feelings are all constructed and interconnected in this neural net, and all have a possible relationship with one another. The concept and the feeling of love, for instance, is stored in this vast neural